Hello everybody. This is a video response to AMIDUFFER, Drew. I had placed a comment on one of his videos where I said something to the effect that he reminded me of a friend that I had when I was in the military, and I told him that he reminded me of a reincarnation of this friend. I do not believe in reincarnation. I only made that statement to emphasize the fact that Drew does remind me a lot of this friend that I had. I don't know how old you are, Drew, but this was back in 1964, 65, and 66. And this guy's name was Bob. His on-air personality name was Robert. And he was from New York, and he had gone to, he had graduated from the university, I think Ithaca College in New York. He didn't go to Syracuse, but he lived in that area. That was his home. When I transferred to Karamursel, Turkey, I went up to the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service station and applied for a part-time job, which they hired me, and I worked in the evening and on the weekends. When I was in the military, I very seldom worked at my regular job on the weekend. I more or less had a 5-day-a-week job from 9 to 5, say. But anyway, I started doing a program, and shortly after they hired me, Bob was transferred to the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service there in Karamursel. Now Bob, that was his career field. He wasn't working part-time. He was hired and went to school in the military for Armed Forces Radio. And when Bob came in, I would have conversations with him. And here's where the similarities with you, Drew. He liked classical music, and I considered him an intellect, and I'm sure you're an intellect too. You strike me as a person that reads a lot, and he did. And he started turning me on to a lot of great literature, and I would read certain books that he would suggest, and we would discuss them. But when he came in, a lot of us there said, well, wonder why he's in the Armed Forces Radio, because, you know, he really wasn't outspoken, and he had very few things to say. And he normally would, you know, carry on a conversation with you, but he was always studying, and some of his humor, that the way you do yours, Drew, reminds me of him. So I'm trying to do this video response without it being too deep. And I made that comment on your video, and I meant everything I said. You do remind me of him. But let me try to make a long story short. The station manager was a master sergeant, and he figured that Bob, or Robert, was not qualified for being in radio because he wasn't really that outgoing, and he more or less just stayed to himself. So they started giving him jobs like when new records would come in from AFRS, he would fill out the catalog logs for the music. and he never was on the air. They had a program in the evening, a guy did, where they played a lot of jazz and big band music. And for some reason or another, this guy couldn't do his show one evening. And the station manager told Robert, that he was going to have to do this guy's program. And he kind of acted like he really didn't want to do it. And all of us other guys, we had been talking about him, you know, and so we knew the time that he was coming on. I think it's like 8 o'clock, and we'll say 8 o'clock in the evening. And we couldn't wait to see what he sounded like on the radio. So we were in the barracks, all of us, and we had the radio on. And we knew he was coming on at 8 o'clock. So the same theme song to that program, I think it was like a 2-hour program, a live program from the studio there at AFRS at Karamursel. The theme song came on, and Bob Gerard, that was his name. So if anybody knows Bob, that was his name. I'm just going to let it go out there. Robert Gerard was his name. But anyway, when he came on, this voice, I mean, it sounded like we were listening to one of the top one of the top radio stations from New York. This guy had a fantastic voice. His delivery was perfect, and he knew everything about the artist. And he would, you know, as he would play the music, I mean, he would give you a background on the song and who was playing the bass, and he knew everything about the music, and had this fantastic professional radio voice. And when he would do the news, I mean, it was network quality. In fact, he was one of the best radio announcers that I ever heard. And so, of course, after all the guys at the radio station heard his delivery and his ability to do what he did, of course, his stock went up to the roof. You know, everybody was talking about Bob. And he and I did a program together. Of course, you know, I mean, I was a country disc jockey, more or less. I played a lot of the country music, although at night I did play some of the top 40. But I was primarily the DJ for the country music. And Bob and I did a program in the evening, and he would more or less do the color, and I'd do the background, and he and I really played well off of each other. So we had quite a few listeners on the program. But anyway, Bob and I became good friends, and Drew, you remind me a lot of him. Of course, when I left Turkey in 1966, Bob was still there, and I have had no contact with him in all those years. I don't know how Bob was. He and I were close to the same age. I probably was a couple of years older than him, so if he's still around, he would be about 68 years old now. So that's my video response to let you know that I do not believe in reincarnation. I don't think you're reincarnated from Bob. But you all have a lot of the same, I don't know, it's just the personality that I see on your videos reminds me of the personality of Bob. And he was a thinker and a great conversationalist, and he spent most of his time reading books, and I read quite a few books that he suggested. Well, that's about it. I hope this wasn't too boring of a video, but that's my story. We'll see you, Drew. Have a good day. Bye-bye.